You ever stop and think, could an economic plan, just a set of policies, be so explosive it could actually bring down an entire government? And not in years, but in a matter of weeks? Well, let's get right into it, because we're about to see how fiscal policy isn't just some dry textbook theory. It has real, dramatic, and sometimes world-shaking consequences.
So, to set the scene, we're heading to the United Kingdom. In the fall of 2022, a brand new prime minister steps into office full of big ideas, and she's got this bold new economic plan she says will supercharge the nation's growth. But what looked like the start of a new chapter was actually just the start of a very, very fast countdown.
And boom, just 45 days later, this was the headline splashed across the world. The Prime Minister, Liz Truss, forced to resign. Her time in office became one of the shortest in British history, and it was completely torpedoed by her own economic plan. The very thing that was supposed to save the economy ended up shattering it.
So this brings us to the big mystery, right? I mean, tax cuts, they're usually popular. Who doesn't want more money in their pocket? So how on earth did a plan built around tax cuts trigger a total financial meltdown and end a political career so spectacularly? Well, to figure that out, we need to understand the tool she was trying to use.
To get that answer, we've got to look under the hood at the powerful levers every single government has at its disposal to influence the economy. And the main one in our story today is something called fiscal policy. Think of it as the government's economic playbook.
So, what exactly is fiscal policy? Stripped down, it's just how a government uses its budget, so what it spends money on and how it collects money through taxes to steer the entire economy. It's basically the gas and the brake pedal for a country's economic engine.
And that gives you two basic moves. On one hand, you have expansionary policy. That's when you cut taxes or crank up government spending to boost the economy. You're hitting the gas. On the other hand, you've got contractionary policy. That's the opposite. You raise taxes or cut spending to cool down an economy that's running too hot. You're tapping the brakes. Seems simple enough, right? But as we're about to see, timing is everything.
Okay, let's jump back to the UK. Now that we have these concepts down, we can see exactly why the markets absolutely panicked. Liz Truss decided to pull that expansionary lever, to stop on the gas, at precisely the worst possible moment.
Here's what the plan was. Massive tax cuts. But, and you have to listen closely because this is the absolute kicker, there were no plans to cut government spending to actually pay for them. In economic speak, these are called unfunded tax cuts. The government was basically planning to spend more while earning a whole lot less.
And here's the context that makes it all so crazy. At that exact moment, the UK was already fighting a huge battle with 10% inflation. That's the fastest prices had risen in 40 years. The economic engine wasn't just warm, it was already redlining.
You can probably see where this is going. This move set off a super dangerous chain reaction. See, unfunded tax cuts mean more money in people's pockets, which is great. But that extra money means everyone starts demanding more goods and services. And when demand shoots past supply, prices get pushed up even higher. That's what we call demand pull inflation. Her plan was like throwing a whole can of gasoline on an already out-of-control fire.
The reaction from the financial markets was instant and, honestly, brutal. Look at this. The interest rate, the yield, on UK government bonds just exploded right after the announcement. That spike is the market literally screaming, "We have lost all confidence in you." They were betting on runaway inflation and started demanding a much higher interest rate just to be willing to lend the government money.
And at the exact same time, the country's currency, the British pound, absolutely cratered against the US dollar. That kind of steep drop is a massive vote of no confidence from the rest of the world. It showed a complete loss of trust in the UK's ability to manage its own finances.
The result was a total political catastrophe. The financial chaos was so bad the government had to do a full 180, scrap the entire plan, fire its finance minister, and, you guessed it, the prime minister herself had to resign. It was just a stunning, real-world lesson in the raw power of fiscal policy. Okay, so why does all this matter to you? Because understanding these principles isn't just about following the news. This is the fundamental stuff that gets tested in really high-stakes exams, like the UPSC Civil Services exam in India. And it's exactly what you need to know if you want a really deep, practical understanding of how the economy works.
So, let's put that knowledge to the test. Here's a real question from a past paper. It's asking which of these factors can cause or add to demand pull inflation. Go ahead, take a look at the options. Based on everything we just talked about, what do you think?
All right, let's walk through it together.
We know expansionary policies and fiscal stimulus, those are just different ways of saying hitting the gas to boost demand. So options 1 and 2 are definitely in. Higher purchasing power. Well, that just means people have more money to spend, which obviously fuels demand. So number 4 is in too. But what about rising interest rates? We know that makes borrowing more expensive, which slows spending. It cools demand. So number 5 is out.
And that leaves us with A. See? It's pretty cool, right? When you understand the core logic behind fiscal policy, you can take apart these complex, real-world questions and find the right answer. This kind of applied knowledge is what really makes a difference.
Now, the UK story was a crisis, for sure. But believe it or not, things can get way, way more extreme. For a truly scary story, we have to look at what happens when a government's fiscal policy isn't just poorly timed, but is just chronically reckless, year after year, and is backed up by its own central bank.
This right here is the single most dangerous recipe for inflation. It's when you mix expansionary fiscal policy, so a government spending way more than it brings in, with expansionary monetary policy. That's when the central bank just starts printing new money to cover all that debt.
And Argentina is the textbook example of this. For years and years, the government ran these massive fiscal deficits, consistently spending way beyond its means. It was like an aggressive expansionary policy that just never stopped.
And what was the result of that? Well, here it is. To pay for all that overspending, the central bank just printed more and more money. And the consequence was hyperinflation. I mean, look at that. Prices spiraled completely out of control, hitting an unbelievable 275%, just wiping out people's life savings and crippling the entire economy.
Which brings us to one final, really crucial test of everything we've learned. Out of these 4 ways a government can manage its budget, which one do you think is the absolute most inflationary? Just think back to that Argentina example.
And the answer, without a doubt, is creating new money. But why? Because it's pulling both levers at the same time. The government is spending like crazy, that's the fiscal policy. And the central bank is pumping pure new cash into the system to pay for it. That's the monetary policy. It is the ultimate recipe for an inflationary disaster.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. We've seen that the basic ideas of fiscal policy, speed up, slow down, are actually pretty simple. So why then, from the UK to Argentina and all over the world, do governments so often get it catastrophically wrong? Maybe the real challenge isn't just about understanding the economics. Maybe it's about surviving the politics.